Jain students, a very good morning. I hope you all have understood the first part of the chapter, Ishwaran the Storyteller. In the previous lecture, we came to know about the author, about the characters involved, and about the chapters. And in the first part of the chapter, how Mahendra was quite affected by the storytelling quality of his cook Ishwaran. So now I'd like you all to open page number 14. The place I come from is famous for timber. Ishwaran would begin. There is a richly wooded forest all around. The logs are hauled on to the lorries by elephants. They are huge, well-fed beasts. When they turn wild, even the most experienced Mahavat is not able to control them. After this prologue, Ishwaran would launch into an elaborate anecdote involving an elephant. यहाँ पे timber का मतलब है wood that has been processed for commercial purpose. Hauled means transporting something, and prologue means an introductory speech. Elaborate का मतलब है detailed. So here now Mahendra recollects another story told by Ishwaran. Ishwaran said that his native village was surrounded by a huge forest which was full of trees. The huge logs of timber was sold for commercial purposes. They were transported onto the vehicle by elephants, and they were huge elephants. And now here Ishwaran is telling that if these elephants they became mad and go out of control, then even the experienced Mahavat would not be able to take them in control. This introductory session was followed by a detailed story involving an elephant. Now the next paragraph. One day, a tusker escaped from the timber yard and began to roam about, stamping on bushes, tearing up wild creepers, and breaking branches at will. You know, sir, how an elephant behaves when it goes mad? Ishwaran would get so caught up in the excitement of his own story that he would get up from the floor and jump about, stamping his feet in emulation of the mad elephant. Here, tusker it means an elephant who is having tusk. Roam about का मतलब है to move around. Stamping means hitting something with great force. And emulation it means effort to match या उससे ऊपर जाना किसी भी person by imitating or copying, उसको imitate करना या copy करना. So here the story was narrated as follows by Ishwaran. One day an elephant escaped from the timber yard and roamed around the forest. It stepped on the bushes and crushed them, tore the creeper plants and broke branches of trees which came in its way. Ishwaran asked Mahendra whether he knew how a mad elephant behaved. In order to make his story more effective, Ishwaran stood up and jumped around the place, hitting his foot so on the ground in order to copy the action of the mad elephant. The elephant reached the outskirts of our town, breaking the fences down like matchsticks. He would continue. It came into the main road and smashed all the stalls selling fruits, mud pots, and clothes. People ran helter-skelter in panic. The elephant now entered a school ground where children were playing, breaking through the brick wall. All the boys ran into the classrooms and shut the doors tight. The beast grunted and wandered about, pulling out the football goalpost, tearing down the volleyball net, kicking the flattening the drum, kept for water and uprooting the shrubs. Meanwhile, all the teachers had climbed up to the terrace of the school building. From there, they helplessly watched the depredation of the elephant. There was not a soul below on the ground. The streets were empty, as if the inhabitants of the entire town had suddenly disappeared. Here, kids' outskirts word is used. It means the outer area, the periphery of something. Helter skelter is used. Helter skelter means here and there. Panic, you might be knowing about panic, but still it's a sudden fear that is being caused by some unthinkable behavior. The poor beast grunted means make a loud sound. The next word is depredation. Depredation means attacks which are made to destroy something. So now, here, Iswaran is elaborating that as the elephant reached the outer boundaries of their town, it broke the fence. The fences seemed as if they were like matchsticks for that huge creature. The elephant reached the main road and broke all the stalls selling different things like fruits, mud pots, and clothes. The people, they were taken aware, and so they ran here and there. Then it broke the wall of a school and entered the ground where the students were playing. All the students ran back into their classrooms and closed the doors. The elephant made loud noises and roamed around in the school premises. It broke the goal post in the football ground, tore the net that had been put up in the volleyball court, stepped on the water drum and broke it, and tore many shrubs as well. The teachers, they climbed onto the roof of the school building, and from there they were watching helplessly as the elephant was destroying the school property. There was not even a single person to be seen around. All the streets of the town were empty, as if all the people were scared of the mad elephant. Now, the next paragraph. I was studying in the junior class at that time and was watching the whole drama from the rooftop. I don't know what came over me suddenly. I grabbed a cane from the hands of one of the teachers and ran down the stairs and into the open. The elephant grunted and menacingly swung a branch of a tree which it held in its trunk. It stamped its feet, kicked up a lot of mud and dust. It looked frightening. But I moved slowly towards it, stick in hand. People were watching the scene hypnotized from nearby house top. The elephant looked at me red-eyed, ready to rush towards me. It lifted its trunk and trumpeted loudly. At that moment I moved forward and, mastering all my force, racked its third toenail on the quick. The beast looked stunned for a moment. Then it shivered from head to foot and collapsed. Here, students, hypnotize means to take somebody in control by speaking out some words. Mastering means putting all the strength together. And racked means to hit something very noisily. The last word, collapsed, it means to fall down. So, now Iswaran is describing that at the time of the incident, Iswaran was studying in one of the primary classes, in one of the junior classes in the school. He was watching all the destruction which the elephant was doing from the rooftop. Suddenly, he took the stick from one of the teacher and ran downstairs towards the school ground. The elephant made a loud noise when he saw a small boy approaching it. It lifted a branch of a tree in its trunk, hit its foot on the ground, which threw a lot of mud and dust in the air. The elephant was threatening Iswaran, but the boy was not afraid at all. With the stick in his hand, he moved towards the elephant, slowly. Many people had climbed on the rooftop of their houses, and they witnessed the incident. They were standing still and were struck, waiting to see what would happen next. Iswaran saw that the elephant had colored eyes, which was full of anger. It again lifted its trunk and made a loud trumpet a sound, as it was about to attack Iswaran. Just then, he collected all his force and hit the elephant's third toenail very quickly. The elephant was stunned at what had happened. Then it reacted by shivering all over, fainted, and fell on the ground, that also unconscious. Now, all of you turn to the next page. Okay, the first paragraph on the next page. At this point, Iswaran would leave the story unfinished and get up mumbling, "I will be back after lighting the gas and warming up the dinner." Mahendra, who had been listening with rapt attention, would be left hanging. When he returned, Iswaran would not pick up the thread of the story right away. Mahendra would have to remind him that the conclusion was pending. Well, a veterinary doctor was summoned to revive the animal. Iswaran would shrug casually. 2 days later, it was led away by its Mahavat to the jungle. Here, rapt attention means completely fascinated. Pick up the thread of the story. It means that he would not restart the story from where he had left. A veterinary doctor is a doctor who treats the animal. Summoned means call. And shrug का मतलब होता है just to raise your shoulders very slightly. So after this, Iswaran would leave the story incomplete. In a low voice, he would say that he would return after lighting the gas stove to warm the dinner, as they were getting late for the meal. Mahendra would be very curious to know what happened next and would feel disappointed that Iswaran had left the story unfinished. On returning, he would not continue with story as he wanted to arouse curiosity in Mahendra. Mahendra, who was also eager to know the ending, would ask him to conclude the story. Then Iswaran would say very casually that a veterinary doctor was called to bring the elephant back to consciousness. And after 2 days, the Mahavat came and took the elephant back to the jungle. Well, how did you manage to do it, Iswaran? How did you bring down the beast? Mahendra, he was also very curious, so he would ask Mahendra very curiously. He wanted to know that how did the young Iswaran manage to overpower the huge elephant? It had something to do with the Japanese art, I think, sir. Karate or jutitsu, it is called. I had read about it somewhere. It temporarily paralyzes the nerve system, you see. Iswaran then would say that he performed a Japanese martial art. He said that it was earlier karate or jujitsu. He had read about it somewhere that the martial art rendered a person unconscious by disrupting the nervous system. Not a day passed without Iswaran recounting some story packed with adventure, horror, and suspense. Whether the story was creditable or not, Mahendra enjoyed listening to it because of the inimitable way in which it was told. Iswaran seemed to more than make up for the absence of a TV in Mahend's living quarters. यहाँ पे credible का मतलब है able to believe and inimitable का मतलब है very unique. So, in this paragraph, every day Ishwaran would narrate 1 or 2 stories that were full of adventure, horror, and suspense. Sometimes Mahendra felt that the story was a fiction, but still he enjoyed listening to it because of the unique way in which Ishwaran narrated it. As there was no television set at the place where they lived, so these stories were the only source of entertainment for Mahendra. Now, the next paragraph. One morning, when Mahendra was having breakfast, Iswaran asked, "Can I make something special for dinner tonight, sir?" After all, today is an auspicious day. According to tradition, we prepare various delicacies to feed the spirits of our ancestors today, sir. Here, kids, auspicious means good and delicacies means tasty food. एंसेस्टर का मतलब तो पता ही होगा आपको, इट मीन्स हमारे परिवार के एल्डर्स. और स्पिरिट्स का मतलब भी आपको पता होगा, स्पिरिट्स मीन्स द सोल ऑफ द डेड पीपल. सो वन मॉर्निंग Mahendra was having his breakfast. At that moment only, Ishwaran came and asked him that whether if he could prepare a special meal for dinner, as it was a very good day. He then added that on that day they prepared special food for the souls of the dead elders of the family. The next paragraph. That night, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and complimented Ishwaran on his culinary skills. He seemed very pleased but unexpectedly launched into a more garish account involving the supernatural. Culinary skills means the skills which are related to cooking, and garish means something which is too colorful and fancy, जिसकी वजह से उसे नापसंद किया जाता है. And supernatural means related to ghosts or spirit. So Ishwaran, here we come to know that he had prepared a delicious dinner, and Mahendra, he praised his cooking skills. Ishwaran was quite happy on being praised, but all of a sudden he started narrating a detailed story that was related to ghosts and supernatural powers, and that was disliked by Mahendra. Next paragraph. You know, sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground. He started. Mahendra was jerked out of the pleasant reverie he had drifted into after the satisfying meal. I knew on the first day itself when I saw a human skull lying on the path. Even now, I come across a number of skulls and bones, Iswaran continued. A reverie means a state of being pleasantly lost in one's thought, मतलब कि a daydreamer. So यहाँ पे Ishwaran is telling, he said to Mahendra that the site of the factory was earlier a place where the dead peoples were buried. Mahendra jerked out of the pleasant thought after the tasty meal. Then Ishwaran continued that on the first day itself he had seen a human skull that was lying on the ground when he was returning after buying vegetables. Here Ishwaran telling that even later he had come across a number of skulls and bones lying around the place. Now the next paragraph, turn your page. He went on to narrate how he sometimes saw ghosts at night. I am not easily frightened by these things, sir. I am a brave fellow. But one horrible ghost of a woman which appears off and on at midnight during the full moon. It is an ugly creature with matted hair and a shriveled face, like a skeleton holding a fetus in its arms. Shriveled का मतलब है wrinkled और fetus का मतलब है one unborn baby. So here Ishwaran is adding that sometimes he saw ghosts at night. Then he is adding that although he did not believe, neither was he scared of them, as he himself was a great brave person. But once he saw a very horrible ghost of a woman, and that ghost appeared on a full moon night at midnight at 12 o'clock. It was very ugly. Its hair was matted and the face was shrunken. It was filled with wrinkles. It looked like a skeleton was holding an unborn baby in its arm. Now the next paragraph. Mahendra shriveled at the description and interrupted rather sharply. You are crazy, Ishwaran. There are no such things as ghost or spirit. It is all a figment of your imagination. Get your digestive system examined and maybe your head as well. You are talking nonsense. यहाँ पे फिगमेंट का मतलब है प्रोडक्शन. तो Mahendra disliked the story which was being narrated by Iswaran that day, and he interrupted very sharply. He scolded Iswaran and said that he had gone mad. Mahendra said that ghost did not existed. He added that it was all Iswaran's imagination. He ordered Iswaran to get himself checked up, to get his digestive system and his brain examined, as he was speaking total nonsense. Mahendra asked him to get his digestive system checked up because when a person is suffering from constipation, he gets nightmares and dreams of ghosts and supernatural powers. The next paragraph, he left the room and retired for the night, expecting Iswaran to sulk for a couple of days. But the next morning, he was surprised to find the cook as cheerful and talkative as ever. Sulk का मतलब है to be silent. So here, Mahendra had thought that Iswaran would remain quiet for a few days, as he had scolded him the previous night. He was astonished to see a cheerful and talkative Iswaran the next morning. The next paragraph. From that day on, Mahendra for all his brave talk went to bed with a certain unease. Every night he peered into the darkness outside through the window next to his bed, trying to make sure that there was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity. But he could only see a sea of darkness with the twinkling lights of the factory miles away. Here beta vicinity means nearby area. So Mahendra showed that he was very brave, but on the contrary, he was uneasy because of the story which was being narrated by Iswaran. Every night before going to bed, he peeped out of the window next to his bed to assure himself that there was no ghost around. He did not see any ghost, but only saw darkness and the twinkling lights of the factory. Now if you turn to next page. He had always liked to admire the milk white landscape on full moon night. But after hearing Iswaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window altogether when the moon was full. So, before listening to Insurance story, Mahendra light watched the white color landscape on a full moon night. As Ishwaran had told him that on the full moon night a female ghost haunted place. So he had stopped looking out on the full moon night also from his window. The next paragraph. One night Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by a low moan close to his window. At first he put it down to a cat prowling around for mice, but the sound was too brutal for a cat. He resisted the curiosity to look out lest he shouldn't behold a sight which would stop his heart. But the wailing became louder and less feline. He could not resist the temptation anymore. Lowering himself to the level of the window sill, he looked out at the white sheet of moonlight outside. There, not too far away, was a dark, cloudy form clutching a bundle. Mahendra broke into a cold sweat and fell back on the pillow, panting. As he gradually recovered from the ghastly experience, he began to reason with himself and finally concluded that it must have been some sort of auto-suggestion, some tricks that his subconscious had played on him. यहाँ पे बच्चों, moan means crying sound, prowling means searching, ग्रूटल का मतलब है साउंड दैट इज प्रोड्यूस्ड इन थ्रोट, दैट ऑल्सो वेरी हार्श साउंड. वेलिंग का मतलब आपको पता होगा, इट मीन्स क्राइंग. फेलाइन का मतलब है थिंग दैट इज रिलेटेड टू कैट. पैंटिंग का मतलब है फाइटिंग फॉर ब्रेथ. और घासली का मतलब है कॉजिंग हॉरर. तो वन नाइट एज महेंद्र वॉज asleep, he was awakened by the sound of someone crying. He thought that it could be a cat looking for mice and tried to go back to sleep. But the sound became more harsh and seemed to be a human sound. Mahendra wanted to peep out of the window, but stopped himself as he was afraid that if he saw a ghost, he could even die. The crying sound became louder, and it did not appear to be the sound of a cat. Mahendra could not stop himself, and so he bent down and lifted his head slightly in order to peep out. In the white colored moonlight, Mahendra saw the ghost. It was holding a bundle in one hand. Mahendra panicked. He was breathing heavily and fell back on the bed. After some time, he recovered from the scary experience and thought that probably his subconscious mind was showing him the ghost as he had been thinking of it. So he assured himself that actually there was no ghost and his mind was simply playing a trick on him. Now, the next paragraph. By the time he had got up in the morning, had a bath, and came out to have his breakfast, the horror of the previous night had faded from his memory. Iswaran greeted him at the door with his lunch packet and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Iswaran grinned and said, "Sir, remember the other day when I was telling you about the female ghost with a fetus in its arm? You were so angry with me for imagining things. Well, you saw her yourself last night. I came running, hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room." Yeah, beta, grinned means to smile broadly, and resolving means to decide. So, by the time Mahendra woke up, took his bath, and came out for breakfast, he had forgotten the ghostly experience of the previous night. Ishwaran greeted him early in the morning, gave him his lunch and his bag. As Mahendra was about to leave, Ishwaran smiled and said that the other day Mahendra had scolded him for discussing the ugly ghost, but last night Mahendra himself saw it. Ishwaran had heard Mahendra's cries the previous night. Next paragraph. A chill went down Mahendra's spine. He did not wait for Ishwaran to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. Spine का मतलब है backbone, and handed his papers मतलब he resigned. So here, Ishwaran's comment, it scared Mahendra once again. He did not hear him further and hurried off to his office. He decided to resign from the job and leave that haunted place. He could not live there any longer. So, dear students, I hope this much is quite understandable for you all. If you find any problem, please feel free to ask. Okay? Thank you. अच्छा, before